Welcome to Campus Ministry Today. I'm Steve Shadrack, and my friend and partner in ministry, Paul Wooster, is with us today as well. It's an honor that you would join us for these episodes. We're having a lot of fun, and we pray that they would be inspiring and equip you with the very best practices, really for seeing a movement of God on your campus and your church and beyond. And we've had over 50 podcast episodes. It's hard to believe that, Paul.
Wow.
We've interviewed some incredible guests. We have one this morning that we're going to really excited about. But one idea that we have for maybe some of your staff development is to get your team together, possibly on a weekly basis, maybe, and begin to listen to one episode a week together and then discuss it, evaluate it, and see if there's something you and your staff could learn. So we are more than a podcast, though. Our entire ministry at CMT is designed to give you the vision and tools to multiply your impact on your campus. Our website, campusministry.org, it has literally hundreds of free articles and resources from a wide range of leaders. Paul and I are also available for training with groups of collegiate leaders, especially with your staff. But to take your college ministry from really a ministry to a movement, that's one of our goals, to help ministries around the country and world understand that. Also, we are launching our first ever conference. We're fired up about that. We're calling it EDM 23. It's May 8th through 11th next year in Fort Worth, Texas. And we're bringing the best of the best practitioners. Our guest today will be part of that conference, and he's bringing a lot of his staff to it as well. But to equip you in evangelism, in disciple making, in mission mobilization. We already have close to 600 leaders, staff, collegiate ministry staffers signed up and already and praying for 1,000. So go to campusministry.org to register. We'd be honored to have you. Our guest today, Paul's about to introduce him. We're excited to have him, and he's going to be helping us lead in that conference as well. So introduce our guest for us, if you would, Paul.
Yes, it's such an honor to have Ed Kang join us today, and he is a living legend of collegiate ministry and church planning. And he started as a co-vocational college minister at UC Berkeley in the 80s, and he's still laboring for Christ across the street from the UC Berkeley campus. And over the years, Gracepoint has seen a movement of God, and they've sent out hundreds of leaders, hundreds of disciple makers to plant churches throughout the country and the world. And so Ed and his wife Kelly launched and lead now the Gracepoint network of collegiate churches that reach over 70 college campuses. And so their vision is to see an Acts 2 church in every college town. And so Ed has been a great encouragement and resource to others, especially engaged in collegiate ministry and collegiate church planning. So Ed loves reading, and he has a list of authors that he loves to engage with, and some of the ones we love as well. He also loves checking out the tide pools because Northern California has a beautiful coast. Carpentry, that's really interesting, just like Jesus. And long drives with Kelly, and most of all, his grandsons, Malachi and Timo. Love that bio, Ed. Can you share how you came to Christ and got started in collegiate ministry?
I came to Christ as a high schooler. I was on my way to becoming kind of a juvenile delinquent, actually. I had 3 older sisters, but I had 2 older cousins, and they were full on into gangs. So they were my role models, and started engaging in petty crime and carrying weapons around. And so I was probably going to go that way. And then this really cool guy, this is in the late 70s, really cool guy with slightly long hair with a guitar, got together a bunch of us youth in West LA area and started teaching the Bible. And I remember it was Saturday morning. He worked a graveyard shift at a post office, so he had time to spend with us, and we did Bible study through the book of John from March to August of '79. And August 15th, I had kind of almost a supernatural experience of everything clicking together and bursting out in prayer for the first time. And so I came back that fall, organized a Bible study on my campus, and then I came to UC Berkeley And we started to form, you know how college is, like you meet your best friends there. And then we started to notice that, wait a minute, after we graduate, everybody seems to scatter.
Mhm.
And we said, hey, why do we do that? Like, the only reason we're doing that is because we're trying to get into the best medical schools or go to grad school or go to New York to work on Wall Street. How about if we dial that down and just get a decent job and
Mhm.
stick together? And I think a big part of that impetus was culturally, I'm what you call 1.5 generation. So I was came to America when I was 9 years old. So culturally, I'm American. Language most comfortable in English, but culturally, I could bridge that generation. And guys my age, a lot of us ended up going into full-time ministry for, I think, a very similar kind of reason. We're looking at the second generation of English speakers coming up, and nobody's leading them.
Mm.
And here we were at the Berkeley College campus, like we're just, like living like college students live, like eating ramen at midnight and studying until 3 a.m. and doing life together. And we said, well, this doesn't have to end as long as we stick around. And so it was that kind of sense of ownership over my younger brothers, a couple of years younger, that a bunch of us said, hey, let's just stay here and just keep this going. And we happened to be going to a church that was about a mile away, and so the most of the constituents of that church were Berkeley College. So it was as narrow as it can be. It was Korean Berkeley students who were Baptist.
Yeah.
So you can't get more homogeneous than that, And so in that homogeneity, there was so much fun, inside jokes, and such a close-knit community that we just fell in love with that. And then I think afterwards, looking back, we realized, oh wow, that was sort of like Acts 2. So that eventually became our vision. So
Wow, that is
yeah.
great, Ed. That UC Berkeley campus has quite the reputation. You know it better than I remember. In the 60s and 70s, especially, it just that free speech alley and all the radical groups and other ministries would bring their whole staff to do kind of a week of evangelism blitz, on that campus. And I remember walking around the campus in the 80s, and a lot of it was still left over, from that Berkeley campus. So you've picked an amazingly historical, unique, but radical campus to start on and stay ministering on. I'm really, really proud of you for doing that. I'm probably your age or older, I think, because I was in college in the 70s, and I'm still across the street from the campus trying to reach students for Christ. So we have that in common. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
As we were looking at your website, Ed, one phrase that kind of kept popping out was this word or phrase, co-vocational. And that's kind of the secret sauce of the Grace Point churches, the co-vocational ministers. I'm not sure our listeners or those who are watching or listening to this podcast would necessarily know how to define that, but tell us what you mean by that and why it's such an important part of the Grace Point story and strategy, if you would.
Yeah, we started adopting co-vocational. It still doesn't feel very natural to us. For years, we just said bivocational, but then I guess the co-vocational is more the term of choice to refer to, just people who have jobs, day jobs. And then, so I like that expression, day job, because people use that whose view of their job is that it just pays the bills, and my passion is sculpting or art or something like that, and I just have a day job. And I do think that's pretty much how we view ourselves. And again, this isn't through some kind of design or principles. It just sort of ended up sort of accidentally becoming that way. I was one of the first crop of leaders, and I had a day job. I was a lawyer in San Francisco by day, and I would BART over to campus, still in my suit often. So and the reason is there was no funding. I mean, you had to Collegiate ministry, I mean, you guys know this, it's I mean, they're every bit as ministers as any ordained pastor
Right.
to the college students, except your approach is really like life on life. It's not so much credentialing or ordaining so that you're kind of authorized by the official church or anything like that. And I think that's what makes collegiate ministry so healthy in all sorts of ways, even in our ecclesiology, I think.
Mhm.
So as we were doing that, when some of us decided to go into full-time ministry, that was not some mountaintop experience where we felt the call of God to do this other thing called ordained ministry. It's just doing what we're doing, but now practically, like some of us needs to do this on a full-time basis. So when I quit and went full-time, my initial salary was $200 a month. It was just kind of a token payment, but my wife was an engineer. So then she, we were able to make ends meet that way. So it was sort of the default thing, and being in collegiate ministry, as long as we have the right understanding of career, you can deliberately get you can get the hardest job that you can possibly qualify for, and work really hard to be above average in your team. Or you can deliberately get a job that maybe you're a little bit overqualified for, and be a great performer in that work, and yet not have that suck up all of your energies.
Wow.
But creating space, and both in terms of schedule, but also kind of emotional space, to be available for ministry. And that's sort of the choice that our people have made pretty consistently. And so it's not like they're driving Uber. It's they have decent careers, but they don't think that that's supposed to suck up this inordinate amount of your time. So then bivocational ministry became more and more doable that way.
That's fascinating, Ed, because I'm an Uber driver. That's kind of how I make my money, to do the ministry. No, I'm kidding. But Paul and I, you might know that we also are kind of major promoters of the idea of the option of support raising. And I love this model that you're promoting. Do you have support raising staff in addition to the co-vocational ministry leaders, or is everybody, all the staff, co-vocational? And how do you discern what's the best fit person to person as to how they're going to fund their personal and ministry expenses and all?
Yeah, we've never had fundraising staff. We're 100% co-vocational, other than our full-time vocational ministers. And when people are doing it full-time, it's because they have a particular gifting, or their level of responsibility rises to that point where they can't work two jobs. And it's a practical consideration. Funding wise, what we've been able to manage is, in the early lean years, it was hard, but once people started to stay after college, and they tithe, and it's not anything more than that. It's just everybody tithes in our church, almost everybody, I think. So then somewhere along the way, we became a financially well-resourced church,
Right.
Even though our roots are in the college campus and continues to be. So we have about 1,600 people who are the next stage above membership. We call them the staff team, but they're they have deep sense of identity as ministers of the gospel, but they are working professionals. And so and we pool all of our funds so that when there's a church plant, our common fund funds the church plant until 5 years, 6 years later, they become self-sufficient as well, as they retain their graduates.
Wow, that's incredible. And I love that team approach where you have, on any given campus, you'll have 15 to 20, especially I imagine Berkeley has more because you guys have been more established, but there's real power where, Shad and I are big fans of teams going to new campuses to start ministry, because that's what students are drawn towards. They're drawn towards that community, and just sharing the load is a really healthy thing. So I can see the wisdom in that model, and that's really valuable. Anything you'd add to those thoughts?
Yeah,
There?
that goes to our discipleship model as well. We have a view that one-on-one discipleship and it's not like we disdain that, like that's great when that can happen, but that needs to be supplemented with a witness of the body. And the way that I like to think about it is I like our freshmen and sophomores to look at the seniors or the recent graduated staff group and say, not I want to be like him, but me and my friends want to be like them. We want to be like them. And I think for that to happen, from the get-go, we need to have a very close-knit, loving group of people in fellowship, and then plant them on a college campus. And there's something that we're drawing them into.
That's great. Are student leaders stepping into this kind of co-vocational role? What does like a student leader look like in your ministry, in your church and ministry as well?
Yeah, I think that's something that we're weak on. We don't have an official student leadership program, but we go pretty much by classes. So then most of the seniors and probably most of the juniors take the ministry upon themselves, and it's hopefully they'll repeat what they've seen done, opening their homes and loving the freshmen and sophomores, and trying to reach out on campus, but we don't have official student leadership kind of track, and that's because what we treasure is friendships. And when you differentiate a little too early, we found that that's really good for the ones with leadership, because you're recognizing their leadership potential and their zeal. It's a little bit, it somewhat weakens their ability to have friendships across the peer class.
Interesting. Yeah.
And so the word peer is used a lot at our church in ways that it isn't I don't know how that is in other collegiate ministries, but they say things like, oh, my peers, and they mean my class, class of 2021, class of 2020, class of 2018. And they'll take pictures together, they'll travel across the world to be with each other. So in order to preserve that, we've wanted to, but refrained from distinguishing among them in the college days, and so that different ones could step up and rise up without there being an application process and a student leadership program and things like that. I'm not sure if we're doing that right, but so far that's what we've done.
And if you have a strong enough culture of disciple making and intentional evangelism, then you could probably get away with that on I've seen other ministries where it's really helpful to have some structure there. So yeah, that's really fascinating to me. I want to go back, rewind a little bit, and let's talk about the early days of Gracepoint and when you really started to see movement. And can you kind of give us some of those stories of how God birthed this movement, and what are some of the key principles and strategies that God has used over the years?
Yeah, man, we're like an old church, so early days maybe would take us too long. But
I know that's a broad question, but
yeah, I mean, we've had that period when we're a Korean-speaking Korean church, actually, and then we became an English-speaking Korean group, all still students, and then we became Pan-Asian. We said, man, we should reach the world and reach other Asians. A funny story. This is hilarious. We used to the school would release the names of all the incoming freshmen. And we get that card, and it's like I don't know what it is. It's like 6,000 cards or something like that of names. We print it all out on cards, and then we pray for them by name for weeks before they arrive. Guess what we did? We just pulled out the Asian names. Now that I look back on that, it's like, what were we thinking? And I think what we were thinking is a little bit of little bit of minority group self-contempt. It's like, well, nobody's gonna, no white guy's gonna listen to us. We see ourselves as little hobbits, and all the white people are elves, and they're taller, and they're not gonna listen to us. Let's just God's just given us this little niche. It was that kind of mentality, I think. And so one day we said, well, why are we doing this? We should pray for everybody. Like, okay, what if they don't come to our group? We should pray for everybody. So, and then we dropped the A in our campus group name, Asian American, and we just became, try to reach the whole campus. Now in California, we're plurality Asian American, and most of the UCs where we are, the actual population of the campus is dominantly Asian. But our church outside of California is now more than 50% non-Asian in terms of college students. So, and in a lot of our campuses, we are the most ethnically diverse group. On 2 campuses, when the campus wants to take pictures for like their catalog, they'll come to our group because you'll get the multi-ethnic scene. But back to your question, some of the principles, I don't know how we adopted this, but it just became a very cherished value, is the value of covenantal relationship. Just staying together and being committed to each other for life. And I guess another way to look at that is just family, right? Because family is like that. I mean, you might have a so-so relationship with your siblings, but when you're down and out, they're going to take care of you, or they better, right? If it's any kind of a healthy family. So we've developed that, and I think that gave everybody a lot of relational security to root themselves. And what that meant for us in terms of ministry is, again, it's back to that philosophical issue. Do you recognize the gifted and the ones that have strong leadership? Well, while doing that, I needed to create a culture in which everybody plays, create a culture in which everybody has the dignity of being a minister. And that meant that not everybody could serve in college ministry, but people were staying around. And so I think one of the watershed moments was, well, we have to develop new ministries so that, and for me, it was so that my friend who's flat out, like out on the campus, discipling college students, and I am roommates with that friend, and I need to be flat out serving God somehow. Right. And so one of the cooler ministries we've developed is a ministry where we send out teams to under-resourced churches to minister to their youth. A lot of churches have a handful of youth that are like in the basement or in some side room with no one to take care of them, no one ministering to them, but they're dragged to church, and they're just biding their time waiting to get to college so they can leave this mediocre, awful thing that they're a part of. And so we go there, and we always go in teams. And it might be the pastor's kids, 2 of them, and then like 3 other people, but we'll go in teams of 3 or 4 or 5. And right now we have about 300 people serving 80 plus churches. And they're preaching, they're preparing messages, they're taking them on trips, we're doing retreats for them twice a year, gathering all of them, create a critical mass. And so what that's done is it's made the priesthood of all believers, like everybody's a minister, and we believe that every ministry should pass the test of, am I able to preach the gospel in that context? It's not just doing good. It's like you have to be able to proclaim the gospel, right? And so I think that is something that rose out of our value of wanting to just hold on to each other and not be up or out, which we were at a certain stage of our church, and that really broke my heart. And so we wanted to retain everybody and develop all these other kind of ministries. So I think that was probably is the one thing that really kind of is at the center of our culture, that kind of feeds out into all the different kind of manifestations of who we are. Now I've forgotten like the question, like several parts, and now I forgot.
No, that was good. That was great.
I have the same problem. I need a teleprompter, I think, when I'm talking to folks, But no, that's fantastic. The covenant relationship concept. It's I'm sure you've preached and taught and trained a lot on that. And I love your vision to see an Acts 2 church in every college town. That's a sentence that I haven't necessarily seen very often. Many churches would say that they're striving to be an Acts 2 church, but what does that mean practically for Grace Point churches? What are some of the key rhythms or practices you guys prioritize that would describe you as an Acts 2 church in these different college towns?
Well, it's Steve, it's what you were describing, that ginormous dining table in an open home. I've until recently, I've lived with 6 guys in our house nonstop from from like our third or fourth year of marriage till recently. Yeah, open homes. I mean, that's in each other's homes daily, that dailiness. That's not a official or ritualistic dailiness, but just an open home doing life together. And I think that is what you get on a college campus, except nowadays everybody's got their door closed and they're got their ear pods in and playing video games or something. But so open homes means that the husband and wife have to be in it together. Being a very life-on-life, discipleship-focused ministry, we'd like the women to be discipled by women and men to be discipled by men, and the male leaders have as their best friend and co-laborer in ministry, the female counterpart be their spouse. So that's pretty constricting, but we've insisted on that. And so that means that then the open home is totally possible. And we have it's a practice that other people find kind of interesting. All of our kids call the college students and others who are in their homes in and out uncles and aunties. It's like, oh, it's like Uncle Dennis or Uncle so-and-so. And we find ourselves introducing like new students to our toddlers that way. And so I think that dailiness, I think that is not possible in your average American church, except on a college campus where everybody lives within like 10 square blocks. That kind of dailiness is really possible. And one of the things I like to point out about Acts 2 is it just describes kind of the sociological reality of that church, just their patterns. And you can't extract just the theology without looking at the kind of arrangement of life, concrete, specific, practical arrangement of life. And we just found that the college campus provides this incredible template on which you just overlay discipleship and open homes, and you have Acts 2 without, being super spiritual and taking a monastic vow and moving in together. We just realized that we have to celebrate that and point that out and preserve that so that people aren't scattering to the winds, pursuing their careers. Because I think, there's a book I love called Refrigerator Rights. It's written by a guy, a professor at Purdue, Christian guy, but not from a Christian perspective. And he talks about refrigerator rights. It refers to the kind of intimate relationship where you can go to somebody's house and open the refrigerator and grab something out of it without asking for permission. So that's so vivid, right? I love that.
Wow.
And the guy says, man, how many people do you have refrigerator rights to? How many people have refrigerator rights to your house? And in that book, he lays out the sociological facts about how, especially for men, you make all your friends during college or maybe in the military. And then for the rest of your life, you just lose them to distance because people will scatter to pursue whatever they think the American dream asks them to pursue. Well, we've got a Christian vision, and you have a piece of the vision. I have a piece of the vision. We have to do this together. And if you leave, you're not just leaving me, you're leaving the vision that God gave us together. And we're supposed to be, Daniel and his 3 friends, and we're supposed to stick together so that we can do this together, because the vision God gave us is something that has to be a community. So let's not scatter. And that becomes powerful enough for people to, actually not be swayed by the highest salary and the most
Mhm.
exciting city to go to. So the patterns of Acts 2 are the college patterns, except we, never grew out of it.
It's good.
That's great. And I think that fits right into your strategy to go to these college towns. And of course, Shad and I are thrilled to death about that idea of just staying focused on the college towns, the universities. So can you share a little bit more of why you guys are so focused on that? And how does that affect reaching other demographics as well?
Yeah, man, that's a real pain point, reaching other demographics.
Mhm.
We've had a little excursions into normal church, just experimentally, and decided like it was kind of almost a cold-hearted decision. Like, no, we can't do that.
Mhm.
We have got to focus on college students. The reason was when young families or just professionals come to your church, we don't believe in audience church where they just attend to listen to preaching and go about their ways. We believe in like, hey, what are you doing the rest of the week?
Mhm.
Most churches that people get together and they don't know what anybody else is doing the rest of the week. Like, no, we want to do life close together and want
Right.
to know if you have fruit in your life and want to disciple you and walk the talk. And then we realize the kind of leader who can disciple older people and families were exactly the kind of leaders, if we invested them into college, would have way more fruit. And so we just ended up not being able to spare the leaders in order to
Right.
reach the older demographics at a level of ministry that we thought was appropriate and was biblically mandated. And so it became a very practical reason. I mean, until all the campuses are reached, I just don't see us making that kind of investment. And
Mhm.
so now, for a variety of reasons, spiritually mature people are not able to lead out in college ministry. And so some of those people are starting to create small house church style ministries where we're reaching our coworkers and things like that. But it's a real small ministry that is currently only in our Berkeley church. And I think as our churches mature, we will get to that level.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's a little bit of a heartbreak, because we'll witness to our coworkers and reach them. A lot of our people put on like Christmas programs for their coworkers at work and try to be
Mhm.
evangelistic, and then kind of do one-on-one and sometimes lead them to Christ, and then have to plant them at another church because our
Yeah.
ministry is so geared toward college students.
Mhm.
I was just, as you're talking, Ed, I was thinking about a conversation I had just this past week with a collegiate ministry staffer of a large organization in his late 30s. He may have turned 40 now. And, all the different options for him that lay out there. A lot of times within their 30s and 40s, people kind of graduate and move on from college ministry. They think there may be a generation gap, or all their peers are, climbing that corporate ladder and they are promoting, and they're trying to think, well, what's my promotion? When am I going to get a real job? When am I going to quit hanging out with 19-year-olds, And so we start talking about that. And I said, what the counsel that I give men and women that are in college ministry, or any ministry really, but find that role, that calling that God has for you, and stay put. Don't listen to the sirens really of promotions and organizational charts and corner offices or bigger salaries. You stay where you're going to be most fruitful, most strategic, and you just stay put right there for the long haul. And so I love that that's kind of what you're challenging people to do. If college students are so strategic, well, then why not spend a lifetime focused on them and create a launching pad, a sending base from Berkeley and these other locations around the country? Yeah, you may not be on the front page. You may not be a high profile Christian leader, but in heaven, you're going to have an amazing legacy of impact. Paul and I talk a lot about EDM. That's the name of that conference: evangelism, disciple making, missions mobilization. It's just another way to kind of describe the Great Commission, Ed, is what it is. But and you guys seem like you're strong in hospitality, you're strong in relationships. I love that, the open home concept. I guess you know that Carol and I did that for 30 years ourselves,
Mhm.
you know. But what about evangelism? It sometimes is a little bit unusual for local churches to really be training their parishioners to actually learn how to share the gospel and how to lead people to Christ. What does the folks in Grace Point do beyond hospitality and relationships in the way of evangelism and sharing the gospel?
Yeah, I want to, before I get to that, Steve, I want to go back to the guys in their 30s who are thinking, oh, maybe that was a phase and maybe I should move on.
Yeah.
I just want to emphasize exactly what you said. Like, don't do that. Don't do that. I think college ministry is just this the secret that nobody knows about. I don't know why more people don't do it. I think that's the future of Christendom. I think it's the future of the church. I think it's a hope of the world. It's you've got to get college students. They're lost, they're preyed upon, and to be engaged in redirecting their eternities and shaping them to live on mission for the rest of their lives. It's like, not to disdain quote unquote normal church, but like, does that happen once a year in the average church? Whereas, man, it's an amazing. So one thing though that I wanted to add to that discussion is the need for guys in their 30s and couples in their 30s to live in close proximity so that you can share the load, because the 30s tend to put all these burdens on you at the same time. Usually your kids are young. If you're working your career, like, where's my career going? In the 20s, you can sort of roll around, but so you got those pressures. And then if you've been in ministry, that's where you have maybe ministry fatigue a little bit. You're getting a little bit professional. Maybe the first love is going away a little bit. You have a lot of management that you need to do if you've got younger staff that you're trying to develop. And so that's a delicate time. And I think for us, living in close proximity, a lot of our couples in their 30s even will live in the same apartment complex, and the kids will play together, and you see we become this large extended family, or become a village that raises our children together. And then the ladies can share childcare. If you're going through, if your child's ill, you have people bringing you food and taking care of each other, so that ministry becomes sustainable, and you don't have to be this huge hero in order to continue to do ministry through that really tough season in your 30s. And so like, cracking the code on that, I think a lot of it has to do with this piece, the childcare piece that we do together. And then it turns out, like, you're not neglecting your children. It turns out that the children love having those friends with adults who they know are friends, and we're all in the same boat together. And they grow up like kind of owning the vision and owning one another as lifelong friends. So I wanted to just go back and touch on that. And to your question about evangelism, we did some research internally. It turns out 75% of our members claim that they became Christian at our church.
Good. Wow.
Now, some of them were, pure pagans. Some of them were, barely churched. Some of them were well churched, but determined to run away from the church as fast as they could. So it runs the range. But a significant, fresh salvation decision. And I think we reach a high percentage of unchurched people. And that's what we're going for. We don't want to be like an incrementally better version of another church that college students will flock to because we got better lights or better praise or better programming. So we've developed ways to do evangelism and go after non-Christians. So some of the things that we've done, I think we do almost everything that's in the typical kind of toolkit of a college ministry. In the fall, first couple of days, maybe first 10 days, just blitz, food, pizza, boba, board games. We have fun food, connecting, just trying to be out there when they're ready to join up with something. So we want to get as big a share of that as possible. So we'll do all of that. I think we've been recently using a gospel sharing tool developed by Greg Steers of Dare to Share, who developed it for youth, and it works for everybody. It works for your fellow passenger on a plane ride. It works for everybody. So it's gospel in 6 words, and it's a phone app. So we've been using that. I think the biggest tool for us that's unique to us and is really just been proven to be the biggest evangelistic tool is a course that we do called Course 101. And we were going to come up with a name for it. We just called it Course 101, and it stuck. But it's a 7-week course, and we developed it internally because back in the days, this was done in the early 90s. If you look for Christian materials, it tended to be discipleship materials. And then there was C.S. Lewis and maybe Josh McDowell, and just the beginnings of what today we recognize as just a renaissance in Christian apologetics and evangelism toward the non-believer. But back then it was slim pickings, and so and college students wanted a kind of an intellectually rigorous material. So we developed this course, and it's gone through a couple of revisions over the years. But whatever kind of large group attractional relational event we can put on, if we can get enough of a relationship so that they'll take Course 101, the percentage is pretty high that they'll become very engaged seekers, or they'll actually receive Christ at the end of the course. I think more than 50% end up, I think way more than 50% will end up at this place. My intellectual doubts about Christianity have now been resolved, and now it's an issue of my will. And so that's been a great tool. We've also developed a bunch of kind of specialized topic talks that we'll flyer for and put on campus. From apologetics talks, we still find that at a lot of our campuses, those talks will draw in a crowd that normally we won't get through our other events. And so it's science and faith, it's do all religions lead to God. Sometimes we'll do felt needs talks, like stress or focus is the new superpower, something like that. So we'll put on special talks, and our staff will prepare for it, and then we'll flyer, get a room, and try to continue to generate new contacts with the non-Christian part of the campus through those kinds of means.
Good.
That's great. I love that. I think that's awesome that you're doing different methods, kind of different strategies, and so it's not just a one size fits all approach. And I think that's really, really helpful. On the Course 101, is that something that a leader would take a student through one-on-one, or are they doing that in groups, kind of little groups?
We do that in different formats. We've run classes, and so we'll take signups, but I think most of the Course 101s are in one-on-one context, either staff to student or student to student.
Great. Yeah, I think that's powerful, because you have such a strong community with the community groups and all that, and then getting that one-on-one interaction where those conversations can happen pretty honestly and organically. It's almost easier to open up with one person sometimes. That's really cool. So let's talk a little more about the disciple making piece of what does that look like, and what are some key principles that God's used there?
Well, discipleship is a hard word to talk about because everybody has a different idea of what that's supposed to mean, And I noticed that in the church world, and even in our church, people will say, "Oh yeah, I'm taking my discipleship group to do something," and what they mean is just Christians who want to grow, and sometimes they'll mean taking them through a Christian growth oriented course, like Henry Blackaby's course or some of the stuff we developed internally. I don't think that's discipleship, like specialized content that you sit and go through. I think discipleship just happens life on life, and it's so we find ourselves using the word soil rather than culture. We use culture too, but I think that if the soil's right and the seed's right, then the fruit will come. And I think the soil has to do with 100 different acts of obedience and sacrifice and self-restraint and joy and relationship that's just on display. And as people get attracted to that, and it stirs them and it inspires them, then they aspire to that. And over time, there's growth. There's a certain, it's sort of like the monastic orders. There's a certain order of life that has a joy and a fruitfulness and a richness that people aspire to through imitation. So it happens in that way. So I don't know if we have a discipleship program or a discipleship strategy. It's sort of like really doing Acts 2 together, and then it's sort of the fruit is discipleship.
That's great.
It's amazing to listen to you, Ed. And I have some background in local church campus ministry, and most of my background is through more campus-based collegiate ministry. We don't really use the phrase parachurch anymore. I don't know. We're all part of the church. Why are we trying to divide it up and put labels on things? But the idea of evangelism, the idea of disciple making, the idea of missions mobilization, I've seen it done in amazing, effective ways through a local church with college students. I've certainly seen it with campus-based ministries, the EDM focuses, and also I'm thrilled that God has given you all this vision, and I'm learning about it, and I want to know more and to be able to serve in any way I can, and that y'all are going to be part of this conference in Fort Worth. I'm thrilled about that. Ed, how many churches have you all planted, and how many campuses are you currently reaching across the country? What's kind of the current number there?
The current number is we're in 18 states, 35 cities, I think. Depends on how you divide up the cities, but
Yes.
it's 34 or 35. And I think we have groups on about 70 of them.
Would that be 70 campuses? Would that be okay? I see. And are you all going after? Is it certain primarily state campuses, private campuses, denominational? Is there a certain criteria? How do you select cities, and how do you select the campuses that you're trying to reach?
We select cities that have a good job market because everybody's Covo. So, but what happened was in 2021 rather, we sent out 400 people to places like Urbana-Champaign, in the middle of cornfields. And so we planted in Madison, Ann Arbor, Urbana-Champaign, West Lafayette, Indiana, at Purdue University, OSU at Columbus, Ohio. And then we sent 90 people to Boston, because Boston has, the entire city of Boston is a campus. It's like 1/3 of the city is some kind of student, graduate student, undergraduate student. And so we're able to do that because the job thing became suddenly no longer an issue because everybody was full remote. And I think people were just kind of stir crazy. And so when the sign up form went out, we had 1,154 people before I closed the form sign up to go on church plans.
Wow.
And we had to, create the groups and even match children's ages so they can have a friend out there. And so now we're sort of, other than Atlanta, we're sort of out of big cities, and we're thinking that we do need to reach smaller towns, and so remote work has made that way more possible, given our model. We usually will go for, we prefer large public universities, but we have now been going to small elite schools that are very zealous to guard the culture of their campus. So we're going after Harvard and MIT and Tufts, and we have a group at U Chicago and Northwestern in the Chicago area. So we got a group at Penn, just small elite universities, and that's been a challenge. It's been a whole nother another approach.
You know, we here at Arkansas consider ourselves to be an elite campus, kind of the Harvard of the South. And so
Harvard of Arkansas.
well, no, the whole country, really. We're kind of the Harvard of the South here. So we'd be honored to host one of your church plants here. So Paul, I know you want to.
Chico State is the Harvard of the West as well. So that's where I've been. So love it. And you know, given your team approach, you have led some large teams over the years, and I imagine your church planners also are showing up to a new location with a significant team. So what advice would you give for those of us leading larger teams of staff and volunteers in collegiate ministry?
Well, I'll tell you the stuff that I find myself saying often to our team leaders is don't use your people to get ministry done. Use the ministry context to get people done.
Oh, nice.
And that's something I need to remind them of a lot, because of course they got a lot of pressure on them, and they want to grow their group and they want to execute well. And here are these staff, you know, maybe they drop the ball, and so you could get into that kind of very task-oriented mode.
Wow.
And that's always a struggle, because evangelism is task.
Right.
It's more than that, but it's at least that. And to do it at scale and do it with a team and do it in a way that, like, it's not just one-on-one cold outreach, though we do plenty of that, you know, dining hall and things like that. Like, to do that at scale with everybody with a job, and you need to orchestrate people's busy schedules. So in that you can lose that focus. So I find myself saying that a lot. Like, ministry is not about you, you know. And then the way you usually finish that sentence is, it's about the Lord, of course, but it's ministry is not about you. It's about you shepherding your people and creating an environment in which they will enjoy ministry and grow in their heart for the gospel and grow in their heart for people. And so that's one thing that I really find myself emphasizing again and again.
That's great. You know, I sometimes I'll be asked to speak, Ed, and on some subject, and I'm tempted to say, well, the 10 great principles so you can be great like I am, or something like that, you know. And I said, nah, that doesn't have a good feel to it, you know. I think I need to take a different approach here, you know. So at different times I'll do the talk or the training, the top 10 mistakes that I've made in campus ministry, or the top 10 mistakes I've made in parenting, and for some reason that people just light up that, you know, that is so much more powerful and attractive to them than, you know, me puffing myself up and saying, yeah, the 10 great things that I've done or something. But so we learn from our mistakes. You and I have been in campus ministry for, I don't know, a similar number of, I'll use the word decades.
Yeah.
But, you know, what would you say to campus ministry leaders to help them avoid maybe some of the mistakes you or I have made? What's a piece of advice or two to kind of keep them from making some of those same mistakes in campus ministry, would you say?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure if any of you guys would make the mistakes that I've made, but here are mine. I think early on, there was a harshness in our ministry because I was fighting for a certain culture. And we were a very sort of affection mafia-like culture, because we're all like Korean, and that needed to get subsumed under biblical principles. And you could be Korean and we could share kimchi together and we really connect at that level. But look, you're not doing your daily devotions. You really can't lead, you know. And so far so good. But I think how I enforced that was at times too harsh. You know, it was like the Levites going through the camp slaughtering people. It's like a purging. And I think as a young leader, I was over threatened by non-alignment.
Yeah.
And I think I chased away some guys that would have had some tremendous leadership potential, because there's that rebellion, like Harry Potter breaking all the rules, like there's
Right.
that core often in a young emerging leader who, and I don't think I value that enough, and felt overly threatened by non-alignment. So yeah, lots of regrets there. As much as I wanted to empower other people, I also think I made the mistake of a genius with 100 assistants, a kind of
Yep.
model of ministry,
Yep.
because I could do things and I was the oldest in the room all the time.
Mhm. Right.
I think I was the most experienced in the room. I practiced law. I was the first to buy a house. So everybody seemed and was less experienced just about life. And I think that ended up creating this sort of top-down patriarchal kind of mafia-like kind of ethos at our church, where everybody listened to me too much. And my solution to that, or our solution to that, is church planting,
Right.
because I'm not in the room anymore, and so
Mhm.
if I should suddenly keel over and die, there'll be some serious repercussions. But I think a lot of our church plants will be fine, and
Yes.
so
Mm.
Yes.
that's a little bit of resilience or
Yes.
anti-fragile aspect of our system. But in terms of my personal leadership through the 30s, through my 30s, I think yeah, I wasn't aware of the unintended consequence of me leveraging my personal gifting to its maximum, because that turned everybody else into assistant feeding the machinery. And our ministry was a machinery.
Yeah.
It was that international harvester that's just reaping and threshing and doing all of that, and it took me to drive it. And so that whole phase of our ministry is something that's fairly embedded, because people do what they observed, even though we keep saying we're not doing that anymore.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, so really regret that. I think it was a combination of just
Mhm.
impatience
Yeah.
and anxiety and just lack of wisdom.
Yeah.
But it's sort of in our system, and I'm trying really hard to undo that.
I understand.
Thank you. Thank you for your honesty, Ed. And
Yes.
that's really, we've all, I mean, I know I've been there on several of those
Yes.
fronts, and
Yes.
just that even over the years, I've like, I look back on some of the things I did when I was 25 and starting the ministry at Chico State. I was like, oh man, I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have done that, So
Yeah.
yeah, thank you. I think a lot of us can relate to that. So
Yep.
as your ministry is focused on multiple cutting edge campuses across the nation, I imagine that you're kind of getting a pulse on what's coming. And so what do you believe are some of the biggest challenges for collegiate ministry leaders reaching students? Let's kind of forecast in the next 10 years or so.
On the whole, I'm pretty hopeful. I'm actually pretty excited and optimistic. In the medium to long term, I think in the short term, we're getting slammed with several forces that we need to adjust to. But they're dark forces, and when things get dark, the gospel shines.
Right.
It's like it cannot help but to be a attractive option to a darkening world. So I think mental health, I mean, that's for real.
Yeah.
And we're seeing anxiety and mental health becoming the norm, and then very disturbingly, not only the norm, but something that gives people social cachet and status. And so people
Wow.
will sort of cast themselves as victims. And so that's sort of a hard line to discern, and you never want to invalidate somebody who has mental health issues. And so that with a hey, let's go get them. Jesus has good work for you to do, and let's get going. And that sort of get up and go kind of visionary ministry of discipleship and vision and mission. There's a mismatch there that I think we need to adjust to. And I think that adjustment isn't necessarily compromise. I think it is being all things to all people. And this is where we find our young generation. And you look at how they grew up, it's like no mystery that they are that way. And that's going to present as a challenge, but I think it's also a great opportunity. I think the thing that's going to be a real challenge is access to college campuses.
Yeah.
I think where we are in these coastal cities and New England and places like that, that sort of Christian gospel proclamation being recast as unwanted proselytization and maybe even hate speech,
Right.
that
Yes.
whole move, I see it coming. And I think maybe we have a few more years to maybe 5 years before we need to rethink access to campus. And I think
Wow.
in order to do that, we need to figure out how to have access to students without official access to campuses. And I know that's not going to be in all regions. I think at UNC, like at North Carolina, a lot of the campus administrators are, Christians and deacons, and, they'll tell us, they'll give us rooms to rent. And but I think in many of our cities, that'll be a real challenge. I think and then I think kind of massive loss of trust in any institution means that as a church, we are on the back foot on that one. And we're actually thinking about, hey, do we just need to be a parachurch? I know, Steve, you don't like that term, but it's a quick shorthand. And because my ecclesiology is, your chapter of crew on any campus is a church. And we all get legalistic about it and say, well, we don't have Sunday service, so I go to First Pres, over there, and this is my campus group. No, man, that's a church. Like, you're a self-identifying group of brothers loving each other, living on mission. That's a church. So we get really like in the church planting world, people bemoan the fact that church planters think that if they start a Sunday service, they started a church. They said, no, Sunday service is not a church. And then on the other hand, if you don't attend a traditional Sunday service churchy church, then you're not going to a church. Or, like, we are going to a church is not how we should think about church.
Good point.
Being the church, right? But we all feel like we should go to a church. So anyway, you got me started on another pet peeve of mine, but
Well, it's one of my great areas of interest. I did a degree on that, church and parachurch executive leadership, that was fascinating, Ed, years and years ago. And so I think a lot about this and read books and the scriptures. And I'm just got back from spending 2 weeks in Ethiopia, and to see what they consider to be a church. They know nothing about buildings or budgets or staff. I think most of the people in our country who focus on Sunday morning church in this building or something with staff teaching and preaching and baptizing, they probably haven't really traveled the world and see what God is doing country by country, village by village, of what the church really is. So yeah, we can't get started on that subject today.
Yeah.
But also, I was thinking this group that I was training, they're on 100 campuses across Ethiopia, and the Ethiopian government does not allow them to step onto campus. So there's staff there that they've had to learn now. And of course, what it does is it's like putting Paul in prison. The ministry explodes, right? It forces those students to take full ownership and full leadership of that campus. And it can have some very positive, dramatic effects.
yeah, because you can't kick students off of your campus.
Yes.
One thing I wanted to chime in there, Steve, is I just love the EDM conference, because we've had our collegiate church people, and we're a tribe, and the quote unquote parachurch, they're a tribe, and I love that you're bringing us together. I really look forward to that. And I don't know, it just over the past maybe 10 years, I've noticed that we're a lot more kingdom minded. It's like getting the job done. It's not about form. It's
Right.
not about whether you're a local church or you're doing it this way or that way. We're like, we got to get the job done. We got to get more people to open their eyes to the college campus as this incredible field where we need more and more groups, and we need all kinds of groups to reach all kinds of sectors of campus. And
Right.
so I'm really, really looking forward to the EDM conference. We just registered 100, but I think I'm going to bring more. I mean, we just wanted to lock in the early bird price, but so we're really, really looking forward to learning about what's going on. I mean, the world's changing so fast, and we all have to experiment and innovate and iterate and learn how to do it from each other.
Do you mind if we spread you all out around the auditorium there so we can kind of season it with salt? We don't want you to all sit together. We know you guys love each other, but we need your influence among the collegiate body of Christ. Ed, we're going to get you to pray. We've taken up enough of your time as you've been so gracious with us today. It's been so fun to have you and get to know you. But we want you to pray, if you would, for I don't know, we've had maybe 60,000 downloads so far this year, Paul, just for the CMT podcast. So, and they're listening to it in different countries, watching it on YouTube, et cetera. So we're gaining some traction, praise God. And so pray for those that are listening or watching, that they would take some of these thoughts, these principles that we've shared, and apply it. And pray for that EDM conference as well. Thank you for sharing about your interest and excitement about it. So pray for us, and then Paul will close us off for the podcast, if you would, brother.
All right, let's pray. Lord, just thank you so much for this conversation. And Lord, just the thought that that so many people will be listening to this. Lord, I just pray that whatever was valuable, whatever was from you, that it would germinate in the hearts of all of our collegiate ministers. Lord, the world is getting darker. We can see that. It's so plain to see. Lord, may we be a city on a hill. May we be salt and light. Lord, may we take on this lost generation where all authorities seem to have just sort of raised their hands in resignation. The parents aren't there for them, and they're getting discipled by the internet. And yet there they are for 4 years on our campuses. Oh, Father, may we go out there with just love in our hearts and just zeal and effectiveness in our hands. And Lord, I pray that we would just offer up ourselves to you, and may you lift us up and multiply us as you did the 5 loaves and 2 fish to feed the hungry multitudes with the bread of the gospel, that we would redirect their eternities, that we would redirect the course of their lives for their families and their children. And Lord, I pray that we would all have the conviction that this is the most strategic mission field that we can see right now. And Lord, I pray that your church at large would awaken to the lostness of the students and how hungry they are to receive not only just love and just human wisdom, but the gospel itself and the message that there's a Father in heaven who loves them. And may we go out in confidence and power in that. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much for your time, Ed. That was powerful. And I wish we had a couple more hours to just keep going. But So thank you so much. So thanks for joining us, friends. That wraps up our session today. Make sure to check out campusministry.org and all the different resources we have there. And let Shad and I know how we can serve you. We're available via DMs on social media or email. So just until next time, God bless.